We're live. All right.
All right.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? I'm Maisha Tio, founder of Check Your Privilege. Really grateful to be here today with Kristen McGuiness. She is an all amazing author, writer, publisher, right, of Rise Writers. And today we're just having a conversation about the process of writing my book and the process of other folks really engaging in the writing process. So, Kristen, thanks for being here today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this together. I just feel it's been a conversation that's been almost a year old because we worked on your book. We both worked on your book during the craziest time of both of our lives. I mean, it really was. Like, I just remember that. I felt like we were two traumatized people that were like creating something beautiful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like this is a dual interview because I feel like I have as many questions for you. As I said beforehand, like I really wanted this to be about like the stories we're afraid to tell because I think that was my experience when we were working together, right? And I remember a couple months ago when we saw each other in LA and you gave that amazing talk at the TED talk that you did, which was just, if nobody has, I will say this, if you have not seen Maisha T. Hill give a talk, because I'd never seen you do public speaking. Like I had no, I mean, I wasn't surprised, but literally she like just mowed the room down. It was so amazing. And afterwards you talked about your mom, like loving the book. So I'd love for you to share that story because I just felt like it touched me so much. And I feel like when we get to write books for our parents and our family and our ancestors, like we know we're doing the right writing.
Oh, absolutely. My mom, Kristen, and thank you for your compliment. I like speaking. I need to do more of those things. But my mom was so touched by the editing of my book. She said, I could tell it was your words. It was not written in a way where it was whitewashed.
Mm.
Um, and Kristen is off the hook. You have got to keep working with her when you want to write because this is absolutely phenomenal. She even like takes pieces that I know were edited. I just know, and she sends them in emails to colleagues when she's having a hard time, right? Because you know, Kristen, when it was going through the process, it was like my mom never saw the book till it came out because I knew
Mhm.
that one kind of paragraph around her kind of dying at the hands of systemic racism. She'd be like, "Take that out."
Yeah.
But that the way it was edited and written, she was just to see her say like it's all good. It is what it is because she saw the editing in the process and she trusted the process as an English major who like loves to look at grammar. My mom loves grammar and English. She just loves you. Like she has this big heart for. She's like, I don't even know Kristen, but if I met her, I'd give her a hug and I'd talk to her because she really took your words and edited them so beautifully. Like it changed my life and perspective. It changed my view of how I even work with white women. She got a lot deeper than what I even told you during my TED talk, Kristen. But just knowing that you were able to take my words and those words were shaped and transformed in a way that helped my mom see herself in my story in a way that she could relate to and yet not feel apprehensive. That was beautiful. Like she's just like she was like, Kristen put her foot in that editing. Like she'll read something and be like, yeah, my style's good, but Kristen, and I'll be like, yeah, okay,
Like I did that. Wait, that I did that.
right, right. So you learn to just kind of move like with the reality that there is someone who can believe in your story and
Yeah.
take that story and edit it in a way that humanizes your voice. And I know you're not an editor anymore, or yeah, at this time. But I would highly encourage anyone who's writing a book, who's working through a proposal, to like really like reach out to you and work with you and let you do your thing so that their words can speak life. Because it's not too often where you have a living ancestor or elder alive
Mhm.
who can see your story and say, yes, that is yours. I lived that with you. And the person who helped you massage that story is off the hook, is amazing. And she's grateful for you. She's grateful that you helped me finally get a book out there that we're just grateful for you.
Aw. Well, I loved it when you told me that, because I remembered how concerned you were with some of the stuff you were sharing about your mom, right? Because I think that's the thing. Like, we know that we have the right to share our stories, but then how can we share our story without sharing what our parents have been through, right? How can we share our story without describing what has happened to our ancestors and our grandmas and our grandpas and the, and the lives that came before us? And I know that's especially important in your story, and especially within Black history. And I felt like, it was funny because we wanted to do that dance where we were able to tell the truth, but also protect your mom. And I think that I think for a lot of people who are writing, even in the memoir space, there's such a fear around hurting the people they love, or betraying the people they love, when actually that's the story that most needs to be told. So when you said that your mom loved it, I have to say that was one of the greatest compliments, because I knew that was the one person you were afraid to read the book. You were like, I'm just going to wait until this comes out. And I was like, out of all the people, there was nobody else, right? There wasn't anybody else you were afraid to read that book. And the fact that she loved it, I was just to me, I'm always glad and honored to be an editor, but at the end of the day, it's your words and it's your life experience and it's your wisdom. And I was just so thrilled to hear that your mom appreciated that balance of true vulnerability while still honoring her, and I know your mom is such an important person in your life, and such a beautiful part of your story. So but yeah, I was, as I was sort of describing this conversation, I think the one thing that I love about you so much is there's this world of pretend vulnerability, especially in social media. It's also pretend social justice. It's pretend I'm cooler and more real and more down than I really am, and that it's all just this facade. But when you actually need to show up and be humble and true and committed, that's not what it is. It's all just a filter. And I think that's what I loved about you so much, is that I've never felt that you apply that your love and your activism and your words are so true. That's why, again, public speaker of and that's what came through in that talk, right? None of that was pretend. All of that is the real transmission of your humanity. And I think it's what makes your work so powerful. So, I'd love to hear how you've come to that, because we were laughing before this started. I was trying to find a picture of Maisha for the post. And because I'm a last minute Nancy, I failed to email her for something. So I was like, shit, I'll just go on Google. And I Google her, and all of a sudden this other lady pops up. And she looked like Maisha, so I knew it was Maisha, but she had this she had my hair. I was like, who's this lady with all this straight, long, thick hair? And as I said, I knew it was you, but I also knew it wasn't you. And I'd love to sort of hear about your transformation from somebody who was hiding to somebody who is so just radically vulnerable in this world.
Oh man, Kristen, that's a great question. I have to take this back to childhood, being selectively mute, non-diagnosed with autism as a child. I was very quiet, and I was always natural, just natural hair or braids. And it wasn't until we actually moved to the suburbs and I became a cheerleader that the coach told my mom, Maisha needs a ponytail. And my mom was like, all right, we'll figure it out. So it started off with braids so that my mom could braid my hair up and put it in a ponytail. And then I recognized that when I had my hair done, more of the white kids would have kind of an affinity towards me. And so I kind of started to lose a sense of my identity to opt into being accepted into whiteness. And so after I started that, then my mom started putting, back in our day, Black women would wear ponytails. You could just put your hair in a bun and then wrap tracks around and pin it in. So then I started having ponytails for cheerleading or just for school pictures. And it just became a thing. I just would not stop wearing weaves. It got to a point where I was gluing the tracks in when my mom was too busy. And side note, every woman in my family is a cosmetologist except for me. So everyone's always doing hair. So hair is a thing too in my household, like just growing up around women doing hair. So the idea even of me putting on hair is kind of part of my DNA of my family, doing hair or putting it on. But when we get into adulthood, we get into this idea of like, okay, I'm a Black woman, I'm a single mom. How do I stand out, right? Because if you know, part of my story is just that fear of the welfare and, the baby daddies. Well, how can I show up in front of white people to make them feel safe? It's getting deep now. So there's a connection between hair and being accepted into white culture. Hair and white women or white men or white people seeing me as someone of value. Like I took my relationship with hair and connected it to whiteness and acceptance. And it wasn't until my partner, always in the story, he said to me one day, he's like, why do you wear those things? You're beautiful. What are you doing? And this was sort of similar to during the process of writing Heal Your Way Forward. He's like, go get a haircut. And I thought about there were times in my life, even before Heal Your Way Forward came out, where I started going back natural. I would shave my hair once a year.
Yeah.
I would wear a faux hawk, but it was a natural, kind of like this, with a bald fade and some designs on the side. And then it was time for me to be successful in the marketing world when I was doing online business management or helping people build brands. And for those clients, because they were high ticket, what did I do, Kristen? Put on a wig. I covered it up.
Yeah.
Just cover this up because it's easy. I can just put it on.
Yeah.
I don't feel like putting on makeup today, so I'll put on a wig.
Yeah.
Right? But all the reasons why had a lot to do with opting into whiteness and feeling like I needed to do that to fit in. And it was my partner who reminded me of that. So then it was like, cut your hair. And I started cutting it and dyeing it again. And it was like, oh, this is me being in my body, being embodied and connecting that to not feeling love, not feeling that I could be authentic in white spaces. And I've been doing it ever since. So it was literally like taking off the wig was like unmasking myself and really giving myself spaciousness to show up as myself, for myself, and not really worried about what anyone else had to say.
I love that. And I love, like I said, I don't know that, Maisha. So when all this lady kept popping up all over Google, I was like, it's so funny how a picture you can like read, you can feel someone's spirit in there. And I was like, that doesn't feel like Maisha's spirit in that picture.
There are some pictures, it's like, you could tell that I was even going through a hard time. Like there are some pictures of me where I was really depressed and I was covering up myself, my depression or my anxiety. There are pictures of me that, I was telling you earlier, my kids are like, that is not you. And I'm like,
yeah.
And I'm like, right? Like, kind of like reaction, like, that's not her. And like, yeah, it is.
Yeah. And your kids know, because the one thing I feel like our kids know our spirits better than anybody, I mean, they're born of them.
Yeah.
So.
But the only one who knows is the oldest son, is my oldest child. Yeah. He knows. That's mom. Yeah. Like he's used to my years of pageantry. And then also you have to think too, Kristen, I did pageantry and modeling.
I know. So I never knew any of that until we were working on the book. And again, knowing you as the face of Check Your Privilege, I was just like, what? Like this was the unexpected surprise.
Yeah.
Alicia T. Hill.
Yeah, man. Well, it's my mom told me, when you're on the spectrum, you take things real literal. She's like, anything you want to be. Made a whole list. I've done everything. If I were to go back to childhood and look at the list, model, beauty pageants.
Yeah.
Does that
you really took that 8-year-old list. You're like, that's the best. So you literally took the list that
I took it literal.
You're going to be an astronaut next week at this point, right?
Yeah. It still happens. I'll sit here and be like, oh, look, I'm going to do a workshop. Okay, let's just do it. I do it and I bring it out.
Yeah. No, that's awesome though. I mean, I think that's I do think that's that vulnerable piece of you of you don't stop yourself from just moving out of your body, right? Of just moving forward and coming into the space. And, and I felt like that's where Heal Your Way Forward was really the beginning of the conversation, of okay, because I felt like that was written so much in service to the folks who need to be doing the work. And I'd love to hear how you balance that, because I know that your work is, you know, and I'll admittedly say, like, when I was even working on Heal Your Way Forward, like, I even asked Rebecca at one point, because I've always kind of been involved in activism. So to me, like, you know, I was like, is this 101? And she goes, this is for people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. You know, and I was like, oh, you know, but I think it is. I think that you work with a lot of people who, like, they're not scared of it, but they're scared of going, you know, doing it wrong. They're scared of not doing, you know, and so, and I mean, not that we don't all have that, but I think there are some of us, you know, who feel like we were here before 2020 and we intend to be here for a lot longer after. And then there's others that woke up that summer and said, oh shit, this is a problem, right? And I mean, and some of those people then forgot about that, you know, 3 to 6 months later. And I know in your work, though, you're working with the ones that you're working with prior to 2020, but I imagine you're still working with people who the light bulb did go on that summer and have actually stayed committed. And so I'd love for you to share about what that landscape looks like, because, you know, I know that from the outside, we certainly have seen this sort of exodus of activism within white women. And how do you navigate that and still show up for the work? And also, I guess, where's the joy, or at least the friendship that comes when, you know, people don't disappear and have actually learned to heal their way forward.
Man, that's rich. I need to have you. It's like Barbara Walters. Okay, thank you for admitting that. I have come to realize, like, my work is very, I don't know if it's the form my other career. I don't know if it's just the nurturing part of myself, but I tend to have the folks who are beginners reach out and start. It's to a point now with my work where I've had to, if you come to our community space and lounge, we have 3 different membership levels just because people are on different parts of the journey, right? So if you're a beginner at that beginner stage, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm not sure. We have like that beginner's level. You're a beginner. You need the daily prompts from Aisha. You need a monthly NVC class so you don't overwhelm yourself. You need to niche down your journey. You need to take that class you get as part of the lounge. So it's really helping people ease into it and like take baby steps to stay committed and stay consistent. That's the first step towards healing your way forward, is just building that committed, consistent practice. And then I have the practitioners. They're the folks who I would say have been with me for the last 5 years, and they're just constantly engaged, constantly practicing, constantly reminding people in the beginners group, hey, don't forget to engage here, sign this petition, go do something local. And then I have my moderators, Kristen, and my moderators are people who are like you, right? They're the moderators in Inner Circle. They've been doing this work before 2020. Some of them are like in their 80s, right? Retired. They've been during third wave feminism, and they're just like, we're just here to support you, and I'm here to show up and help and volunteer my time. And I've just really found that no matter what level of the journey that white folks are on, there's still inconsistencies, and there's still fear that shows up, and the shame. And, you know, like in breaking the addiction to privilege, no matter how long you've been on the journey, you can still opt out because you're not consciously committed.
No.
Okay? And so while it's layered and nuanced and there's multiple folks on the journey, it's always interesting to see how to connect all 3 levels or layers to empower everyone to heal their way forward. Because my goal was really to empower people to say, this is not just an anti-racist thing. This is actually healing work, because you do have to unpack layers and peel them like an onion to actually get to that next up level. And you don't up level until you fail. You don't up level till everything around you starts to fall apart. You don't up level until you just keep, like, what did Will Smith say? Fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. That's the only way to heal your way forward. And I think that's where I am with my work, because people have opted out. People are not interested. People only show up when there is a national emergency. And so even on my career now, it's kind of like, okay, so what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep people engaged and active? And it's hard because I don't have an answer.
Well, I mean, if you did, we would just we could just snap our fingers and it would all be healed, right? I mean, and that's what I loved about Heal Your Way Forward, because I think it is such a gentle form of revolution, right? That like if we are actually able to heal those deep structural systems of our psyches that, you know, we've been socialized in, but also just bred into, that like this is how we know how to participate and survive in a world that requires economic and ethnic disparities and supremacy thinking, then we, you know, we not only actually get to live like more fulfilled and holy lives, you know, we then really begin to change at like the individual and systemic level. And I think it's why, like, as people have disconnected, and I mean, in disingenuous ways, and then in other ways that humans, you know, humans always pull out a hose when there's a fire. But, you know, it's like, you know, it is hard to keep people's attention when there is an emergency because, you know, because there's shit to do, right? Because that's how the system is set up. You know?
The system is set up to keep us constantly busy, constantly distracted, constantly overwhelmed. So then it's like, well, what do I do next? And how do I do it? And how do I, it's,
and how do I fit it in? You know, how do I, when it's not, again, when my house isn't on fire, how do I still make it a priority? Because I should care that someone else's house is. And I think, so I'd love to chat a bit then. What does that mean for your next book?
Well, you know, as I kind of have the inner circle, I was writing through the thorough line of books that I wrote, and I'm like, all right. So when Check Your Privilege was time to kind of grow, it was Check Your Privilege, live into the work. And then it went to Check Your Privilege, lean into the discomfort. And then it went into Heal Your Way Forward. And then I was like, okay. I'm telling stories to help people live into their work. And then I realized, well, when you live into a thing, you got to lean into the discomfort. But discomfort requires healing. And so then it was like, when we get to that last chapter of Heal Your Way Forward, it's like the repair the future. And I'm like, yes, that's the new one. That's the theme. And then I've been teaching this class, Breaking the Addiction of Privilege, for 3 years. It's like our most popular course, our flagship course through Check Your Privilege. And as I have been writing, I'm like, wait a minute, it's repair. No. Before you can repair anything, you got to break that addiction. And so it goes from like Heal Your Way Forward to like breaking the addiction of privilege, because while Heal Your Way Forward is like that introduction to like the layers and learning and unlearning, now you got to think about the addiction to whiteness. And the layers that it's going to take to really go deep into healing your way forward, right? And when we think about addiction and how it works, it's really because we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So it's taking the practices that we have, even 12 steps. The Breaking the Addiction of Privilege program has 12 steps. So it's taking like that 12-step approach that you see in other addiction programs like AA or CODA, and really helping white folks connect addiction to whiteness as to why there is an opt-out or why there is apathy, and giving the 12 steps as practices and processes to move forward. And then we can go into the reparative future, because I think the more we can go deep, the more we can think of repair. But you can't repair something if you haven't looked at what a distraction may be on that journey. So that's those are my next two pieces.
I mean, I love this sort of concept of like addiction and recovery, you know, is applied to it. And I love that idea of addiction to privilege and also addiction to whiteness, you know, I mean, just this idea, right, of like everything, all the privilege that it holds, and the, you know, just even watching still to this, I've been watching like these great accounts that are like mimicking celebrities, right? And like, I think about like the conversations, like there's such a separation between, I feel like, the conversations that I have with authors and friends and community, and like we live in this world where we're so cognizant of being thoughtful and concerned and in community, and these pieces that I feel like we really prioritize in our work, and even at our own expense, right? Even at the expense of profit or success, because we just believe in doing things in a way that feels equitable and right. And then there's this world that splashes across TV and all around us that just seems to give a shit less.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like it just functions in a completely different way. And I often look at it and I'm like it's just, I mean, we live in so many distinct universes. And I think being able to recognize that, like, our continued participation in that universe that we know is selling us lies is what keeps us from actually getting uncomfortable, because there's such a comfort in that of like,
Absolutely.
I might get a piece of that action. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that a lot. And I'd love to hear too. I told you, I wrote you the other day, and the last few weeks have been crazy. And I really want to do the privilege to rebel. I don't know how to say that word. To rebel.
Like rebel.
Rebel? It sounds French when you say rebel.
Let's just say rebel.
Yeah. The privilege to rebel.
Yes.
So, but I'd love to hear more about that. And also, is it happening again? Tell us a little bit about it, because I want to do it.
Whenever I teach a thing, I always try to evaluate, like, okay, is this something that I should just continue to build upon? And it may be something that I do every Women's History Month, just to really kind of break down the phases of feminism in comparison to womanism and what white women and white men, because a lot of men have been coming to the spaces lately too, can do to to really look at that energy of rebellion and connect it to that inner teenager, and how the inner teenager is really informing the way that we show up in liberation and anti-racism work. And so I'm not doing it now, but it is available. You can purchase the replay and the processing session, because what I have a aversion to like one-day workshops, because I know that, you kind of go, you sign up, you get the information. It's like, hey, that was great. I've done my work. But the processing sessions allow you to go deeper and like really make more connections and find more meaning. And so those are available for purchase if anyone wants to get the replay and the processing session. But it probably won't be available again until next March.
Yeah, because it's just a one day thing.
It's just a 1 day, 60-minute. But if I have interest for it to be something that it could potentially be like a 90-day. If I had interest for it, I'd do it as like a 90-day, because I could definitely do deep soul work around that. I just had an idea. So my wheels are good.
Yeah, well, what I felt about, and I love you saying that, like the inner adolescent. And I think that's because for a lot of white people, we only are given that space to be revolutionaries, right? Because then we got to grow, like, I forget what that saying is, like, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. And if you're not a conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain. Have you ever heard that? Like,
yeah, I've heard that.
It's like it's an old white man saying, right? And because, but I think that's the thing, like, you're only allowed to be a liberal until you go into the marketplace,
Right.
in whiteness. And so for a lot of folks, they never actually, and I mean, I will say that myself included, right? Like, we're never allowed to mature in our activism, because our activism gets cut off as soon as we get the job. And so we're like, and similar actually to addiction, right? It's like why they always say, like, you stop maturing when you start drinking. So for a lot of us, I'm actually a recovered alcoholic. Like, I drank from like 16 to 26. And I always, like, I'm a decade behind. I still think in maturity, because like I have 10 years where I just wasn't maturing.
Yeah, I never even made that connection, because it makes sense to why even, in my 40s now, I'm like, wait a minute, why am I so behind, right?
Yeah.
Also, me recovering, I'm in AA currently, working to stay sober, because when I don't stay sober, in connection to our conversation, I do have a lot of like that adolescence behavior that shows up, because when you've drunken for, let's say, since you were 14 years old, there's a lot that you have to catch up to. There's a lot that happens. And Yeah, that rebellion is definitely something that is connected to addiction. Ooh, this is getting good.
Yeah.
I just wrote the whole book. I don't even have to say anything else.
Yeah, you're like, I'm done now.
I'm done.
And
But that makes so much sense because I'm thinking about some moments even this week, Kristen, where I was really like having a hard time regulating myself in my
yeah,
adult body and noticing the pattern of inner child, or I call them inner child, inner teen, and inner young adult. Go through these three phases of the innerness and what each represents. And I was laying in the bed and I actually had to tell myself, get up,
yeah,
get up. It was almost like I'll wait for like my mom, an adult's voice to say it's time to get up, like
totally.
reparenting myself in real time. And then that connection to addiction just showed up in real time.
Yeah. No, it is. I think that adolescent behavior that drives, wherever we've been sort of stunted in our growth, and so that's the only thing we know. Like if I only know how to, if I stopped maturing when I was 14 or I stopped being an activist when I'm 19, that's where I get stuck especially
Yep.
when I get stressed, right? Especially
Yep.
when all my, hackles are raised and I'm scared. Like I'm going to divert to the place where I last knew how to do this. And so I wrote a novel that's coming out in September, and it's called Live Through This. And I actually worked with Tamala Gordon on it from Row House because because she got to be my sensitivity reader, because there's a white woman who is, and it's set in 2016, and she has a history in activism, but she stopped, and then she comes back in because she's a survivor of a mass shooting, but she struggles a lot on how to actually like participate in activism, and at the end
Wow.
of the day, she ends up choosing to do it. But like I told Tammy, like I wanted her to be a character that's like flawed, but at the same time, I didn't want to feel like a promotion of white saviorism, right? Like, and there's a whole conversation in the book around that idea of rebellion, but also how, like, especially in white culture, like, and I still have this with my own family, like my family looks at my activism as as an immature thing,
Yeah.
right? Like they look at it like, oh, Kristen just hasn't grown out of that yet. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to recognizing it as like, and I don't say it's empathy, right? It's just, with the great quote, right? Like love is justice out
And
loud. Yeah, Dr. West. And and so that to me is always, what this work is. It's just, love out loud. But like, it is in whiteness very much this thing of like, well, you're just, it gets condescending. And I think that as people, like, and certainly as a white person, like that is the struggle to like, no, it's not, like, continue to tell us that like standing up for other people is childish behavior, or actually recognizing that this system is built on the backs of others, and is built for continued oppression, is
yeah.
not, that isn't just a 16-year-old speaking. But if you also haven't been able to mature in the activism, it gets really hard, right? And that's where it's easy to get scared of it and be like, ah.
I want no parts of this.
Yeah.
That's so rich. Sounds like rebellion could be a thing. And then we could read your book and we could read a couple other books by Black women.
But no, I think rebellion it's hard, and it's a privilege too. And so I think like that's why I said I really wanted to take that class, because I was like, I think it is such an interesting conversation, and not even knowing how you brought in the adolescence, I think is really, but I do think it's all part of that, addiction to privilege, and just how privilege is this lens, that in white, right, is this lens that colors so much of our behavior and thinking and the way we live.
It's something I would have never thought, something that, as I said during a live on Instagram in June of 2020, would actually have built itself out into a concept. Like, I was even like, I wonder if someone's written a paper about like a privilege and addiction, and there's nothing out there. And I'm like, oh, I'm a revolutionary. There is definitely something to. Oh yeah, that's when I knew I was getting authentic, because I was able to say I am a revolutionary. because there really is something to me being, let's just add the layers, my intersections, disabled, technically, Black, right? Um, what else? Having some form of class privilege to be able to name that, okay, wait a second. I'm seeing something. There is a pattern with white folks. They're not just ghosting because, oh, yay, I just don't want to do it anymore. There's really this addictive behavior because they're not in that reward loop. It's a reward loop. Well, I did it great. I'm going to step out now and go back to living my everyday life in white America. And it's like that slot machine concept, like a notification in life shows up, but it's typically a notification in whiteness that shows up that has you like, yep, that's discomfort. I don't want it. So I'm just going to lean right on back into my privilege.
Yeah.
And it's so like, I just read some of what I wrote for my book, and it's just like, whiteness is so invisible that you have to be in a conscious state of self-awareness all the time to see it.
Yeah.
That's how deeply embedded it is. You literally have to be able to be in conscious awareness. But like any addiction, you're usually, for me, I can't speak for anyone else, you're not self-aware, you're not self-attuned because you're self-soothing. For me, it was alcohol. Right. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, I think privilege is the great escape, right?
Yeah.
So it's why everybody clamors for it, even when they know how false it is, and yet still, I know I see that in myself. Like, I was watching the show White Lotus season 1 because I was sick last week, and that's what I did. I laid in bed and watched White Lotus about rich white people, and and there's this character, the Connie Britton character on it. She even kind of like looks like me, and she's like really successful, and she's just fucking stressed out all that time, And I was like, oh my God, like we think that's the thing we want, and like all it does is make us miserable, and like there's always someone's boot on our neck, right? Like that's what privilege is. It's the boot on the neck of everybody, including the privileged,
Right.
And so it's just, oppression perpetuates oppression, and it just and it was such there was like a great moment with her sort of breaking down, and I was just like, and that's the thing they tell us we want, and because it looks good, because it's privileged, and it's got fancy bracelets on, and it's got this, there's a boat, and
there's money just being thrown at you, and it's just
and then you recognize that like there's no freedom in it. In fact there's less. There's less and less, and so anyway, but I love that. I love your work, and I can't wait to see more. And I loved working on your book, and I can't wait to meet your mom someday.
I know we got to get it. We got to get it done. I'm really grateful for you, Kristen, and just taking the time to go live with me. Tell us what you have coming up with Rise Writers, because I don't know if you have. No, I have a weekly writing group. Write Your Way Forward. Ain't that? If someone's in that writing group, I'm curious, do you have anything coming up that they could attend to improve their writing?
Well, it's funny because I actually was saying, so I just led a group this week called 5 Days to Find Your Story. And I was telling them about finding writers groups with like people that are like aligned with them and their storytelling. And I tend to get, not surprisingly, I tend to get people that also, believe in justice work. And so my community is, and usually also my community does come from a lot of other people that I know in the social media and Instagram space. So I know we share a lot of folks. But I was actually thinking of your writers group. Even for me, I was like, I need a writers group. And I was like, I should join Maisha's. But at Rise Writers, we have programs all the time. And really, my goal is to help people write books and to help people start to develop a writing practice, which I think is the first step. So I sort of say that I help people along the entire path to publishing. And whether that means you're just starting writing and you're trying to find your way forward in that process, or whether you are at the place like like you, where you're working on a book proposal or you have a book. And I also have wonderful editors and coaches. That's what I was saying. I was like, I don't edit full books anymore, but I have wonderful editors that I work with, some of whom I share with Row House and Spirit Bound with Juliet. And then on top of it, I lead a bunch of different groups to help people get to where they want to be as writers. So we did one this week that just wrapped that was amazing. It was actually the first time I had ever done it, called 5 Days to Find Your Story. We're probably going to be doing it again in a couple of months, probably in June. But I loved it, and I loved the group. And it really was just that way to begin to develop a writing practice. And then I have another program coming up in May, which is called 5 Weeks to Book Proposal. So I'll be seeing you in it. But it's really helping people to write their book proposal, which I think is so critical, not just to like sell your book, but also if you're trying to figure out what my book is, right? Because it really is like, what is this big concept? Like, and we really work on like, what does this book promise people? And what is the approach to get them to that promise? And then, what are your chapters, and really beginning to break down your content. And then, if you want to sell a book, especially off proposal, you probably need some kind of platform. And we begin to look at like, one, what is your platform right now? And what kind of platform do you need to have in order to like actually sell something, And I'm really realistic with people in that process. I just don't think it makes sense to set people up to be disappointed. And, writing a book is usually a really big investment of time and energy and money too. And like, if you think you're going to go out there and sell something for some crazy amount or sell something at all, like you have to really be aware of what you're up against and what the options are to you. And then I have a group that I run twice a year called 5 Months to Memoir. Our next one starts in July. We've got one going on right now for folks that are looking to write memoirs. So, and then I always do private coaching. So that's really, where I work with people one-on-one, and we develop your book. If, I have people that are working on novels and YA and everything across the board, where I always try to be the book coach that I need, because I'm a writer too. And I really try to just hold people's hands and figure out what story they want to write. I think at the end of the day, that's why I say like, I'm a part of that process, but really it's the writer's experience. It's the writer's wisdom. It's the writer's storytelling that is what's paramount. And that's, that's what gets people interested in the work, and is ultimately what helps them to sell it when they get to that place in it. But, and for some people that selling a book is like right around the corner, they've got all the pieces, or they've done books before. And for other people, they're at the beginning of a very long journey, and like I say, I'm always really honest with people, like, it's okay if it takes a few years. Like the novel that I've got coming out, I started writing it in 2016, after the Pulse shooting. And every year is filled with horrific mass shootings, but that year they just all felt really close to home. And it got me to a place where I began to be like afraid to go out to like public things. And that's not I'm sort of fearless in certain ways. And I had never really experienced that kind of anxiety in groups of just like imagining that moment happening, and I was like, this is, once my child started going to school, right? Like I kiss my kids every day, hoping I see them at the end of it. And I just don't think that's the kind of place that any of us should have to live in. And it's a place that all of us live in. Every single parent on the planet lives with that. Or not on the planet. That's the thing. Every single parent in America lives with that. But most developing nations don't, because they have sensible gun laws. So
Great line.
We're the only fucked up assholes who decide that like our children get to be sitting ducks. So
Absolutely. Like, have you seen the new gun shelter that they have built?
Yes,
I
did. Yeah,
it's kind of sick to know we live in a world, in a nation that has now gun shelters that can be popped up in a classroom, so that there's a sense of safety at school. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to reading your book, Kristen. That's a really beautiful way that you've like been in process, I'll say. That's the message that just came through for me as I was thinking about your book.
Yeah. Well, I think like a lot of us, it's the like, what can I do? And I did nonprofit work for a really long time. That's my other job too in this world. I was always working in nonprofits, and I think nonprofit work has a place, but as I wrote the other day, like I got tired of like pushing paper for progress, like it is, it doesn't, the change is so slow coming. It's not worth the investment. And it's just, Trudy and I always talk about this, like the nonprofit industrial complex, and so there's so much funding in it without a lot of result. And I just thought, like, what can I know how to write, I can write. So that feels actually like a much quicker way to explode conversation around this. So, and to actually demand that we have a ban on assault weapons, because that's a real easy place to start.
Exactly. But when the NRA is funding half of the Senate, what do we do?
What do we do?
We keep fighting and we keep advocating.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the privilege to unschool their kids and homeschool.
Yeah.
So.
No.
Yeah.
No. So anyway, well, love you. Love doing this with you.
This was fun.
It was. And can't wait for the next one.
We'll do it again. Let's make sure we do it like before the next iteration of the writing group.
You got it.
All right. Thanks for your time today, Kristen.
Thanks, Maisha. Talk soon. Bye.